Ever wonder what happened when hip-hop's biggest stars collided on film just months before tragedy struck? From prison interviews to bullet train battles, legendary feuds to platinum soundtracks that outsold the movie, the show, 1995, captured the genre's golden age in ways that are downright bizarre. Fact 1. The director was a sitcom star. Before Brian Robbins became a documentary filmmaker capturing hip-hop's golden age, he was a familiar face on American television screens every week. Robbins played Eric Mardian on the ABC sitcom Head of the Class, a show about academically gifted high school students and their unconventional teacher that ran from 1986 to 1991. For 5 seasons, Robbins portrayed the charming and sometimes mischievous student, becoming a recognizable figure in family-friendly entertainment. The transition from acting in a mainstream network sitcom to directing a gritty, unfiltered documentary about the hip-hop world was completely unexpected and represented a massive creative shift in his career. Robbins had developed a genuine passion for hip-hop culture during his time as an actor, and when the opportunity arose to direct the show, he jumped at the chance despite having no formal experience directing feature films. This documentary became his directorial debut, marking the beginning of an entirely new chapter in his professional life. The choice to hire a sitcom actor with no documentary credentials was considered risky by the production companies involved, but Robbins brought an outsider's fresh perspective to the project that helped make the film feel authentic and unscripted. His background in scripted television actually gave him valuable skills in understanding how to frame scenes and work with talent, even though the documentary format required a completely different approach. The success of the show, particularly its soundtrack, validated the gamble of putting a former sitcom star behind the camera and proved that Robbins had the creative vision necessary to capture something truly special about hip-hop culture at that specific moment in time. Fact 2. Yo! MTV Raps died the same week. The timing of the show's release could not have been more unfortunate for its marketing prospects and cultural impact. The film premiered in theaters on August 25, 1995, arriving just 8 days after Yo! MTV Raps aired its final episode on August 17, 1995. This wasn't just bad luck, it was the end of an era that had a direct impact on the film's ability to reach its target audience. Yo! MTV Raps had been the most influential television program for hip-hop culture throughout the late 80s and early 90s, providing the primary platform where rap artists could promote their music, connect with fans, and build their brands through music videos and interviews. The show had introduced millions of viewers to hip-hop culture and had become the go-to destination for anyone interested in the genre. When MTV canceled the program, it eliminated the most obvious and effective promotional outlet for a hip-hop documentary like the show. The filmmakers and distributors had likely counted on appearances, interviews, and promotional segments on Yo! MTV Raps to build awareness and excitement for the documentary among its core demographic. Instead, they found themselves releasing a film about hip-hop culture at the exact moment when mainstream media was pulling back from its coverage of the genre. This coincidental timing meant that many potential viewers never even heard about the show's theatrical release, contributing to its disappointing box office performance. The cultural significance of both events happening in the same week marked a transitional moment for hip-hop, as the genre was moving away from MTV-driven exposure and toward other forms of media and promotion. Fact 3. The soundtrack went platinum in 2 months. While the show struggled miserably at the box office, earning only $2.7 million during its theatrical run, the film's soundtrack told a completely different story of success. The soundtrack album was released on August 15, 1995, 10 days before the film premiered in theaters, and it immediately connected with hip-hop fans in ways the documentary itself never could. By October 16, 1995, just 2 months after its release, the soundtrack had been certified platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America, meaning it had sold over 1 million copies. The album peaked at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, an impressive achievement that demonstrated the commercial power of the artists featured on the compilation. The soundtrack included contributions from some of the biggest names in hip-hop, with tracks from artists like Wu-Tang Clan, the Notorious B.I.G., Goody Mob, and many others who were at the peak of their creative powers. What made this success particularly unusual was the enormous gap between the soundtrack's popularity and the film's box office failure, creating a situation where millions of people owned and listened to the album without ever seeing the documentary it was meant to promote. This phenomenon revealed something important about hip-hop culture in the mid-90s, which was that fans were far more interested in consuming music than in watching documentaries about the artists who created it. The soundtrack's platinum certification meant it generated significantly more revenue than the film itself, turning what seemed like a commercial disaster into a financial success story when both products were considered together as a single entertainment package. Fact 4. Russell Simmons initially rejected it. Russell Simmons, who became the face and narrator of the show, playing a central role in guiding viewers through the world of hip-hop culture, was not always enthusiastic about the project. When filmmakers first approached Simmons with the concept for the documentary, he turned them down completely, showing no interest in participating in a film about the hip-hop industry and the culture he had helped build. Simmons was already one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop by the mid-90s, having co-founded Def Jam Recordings and managed numerous successful artists, so he had legitimate reasons to be cautious about how the genre would be portrayed on film. He had seen plenty of media projects that misunderstood or misrepresented hip-hop culture, and he likely worried that this documentary might do the same thing, potentially damaging the reputations of the artists involved or reinforcing negative stereotypes about the music and the people who created it. The filmmakers had to work hard to convince Simmons that their intentions were genuine and that they wanted to create an authentic, unfiltered portrait of hip-hop at that moment in time without judgment or distortion. Eventually, Simmons changed his mind and agreed not only to participate, but to take on a prominent role in the documentary, appearing throughout the film and providing narration that helped contextualize what viewers were seeing. His decision to support the project gave it immediate credibility within the hip-hop community and helped the filmmakers gain access to artists who might otherwise have been reluctant to participate, making his eventual involvement absolutely crucial to the documentary's success. Fact 5. Slick Rick was interviewed on Rikers Island. One of the most striking and unusual scenes in the show features Russell Simmons traveling to Rikers Island, New York City's notorious jail complex, to visit and interview rapper Slick Rick while he was incarcerated. Slick Rick, born Richard Walters, was serving time for attempted murder and other charges related to a 1990 incident where he shot his cousin and another man during a confrontation. Despite being behind bars, Slick Rick remained relevant to hip-hop culture and was working on music even while imprisoned, including his album titled Behind Bars, which the documentary discusses during the prison visit. The decision to film inside Rikers Island was remarkable because prisons rarely grant access to documentary crews, especially for interviews that would be shown in theatrical releases, making this segment particularly valuable as a piece of hip-hop history. During the interview, Simmons and Slick Rick talked candidly about the rapper's legal situation, his music, and how he was managing to maintain his artistic identity while locked up in one of America's most dangerous detention facilities. The scene provides a sobering reminder of how the criminal justice system intersected with hip-hop culture during the 90s, when numerous prominent artists faced serious legal troubles that threatened to derail their careers. Slick Rick's calm demeanor and continued focus on his music, even in such difficult circumstances, demonstrated the resilience and determination that characterized many hip-hop artists during this era. The Rikers Island interview became one of the documentary's most memorable moments, offering viewers an unfiltered look at the real-life consequences and challenges that hip-hop artists sometimes faced beyond the glamour of performances and platinum records. Fact 6. The Wu-Tang Bullet Train Argument. One of the most iconic and frequently discussed scenes from the show captures Wu-Tang Clan having a heated argument while riding on a Japanese bullet train during their tour of Japan. The scene is remarkable because it shows the group completely unfiltered, with tensions bubbling up in ways that most documentaries would probably edit out to maintain a polished image of the artists involved. During the argument, U-God directly calls out Method Man for talking too much during the tour, creating an uncomfortable but fascinating moment that revealed the real interpersonal dynamics within one of hip-hop's most celebrated groups. The bullet train setting adds an almost surreal quality to the confrontation as these New York-based rappers navigate both cultural differences in Japan and their own internal conflicts simultaneously. What makes this scene particularly valuable is that it contradicts the carefully managed public images that most musical groups try to maintain, showing instead that even legendary acts like Wu-Tang Clan dealt with the same personality clashes and creative disagreements that affect any group of artists working closely together. The argument wasn't staged or scripted for dramatic effect, it was simply what happened when the cameras were rolling during their Japanese tour, and the filmmakers had the wisdom to include it rather than cutting it out. This moment became so famous among Wu-Tang fans that it is still referenced and discussed decades later whenever people talk about the group's history and dynamics. The scene also highlighted Method Man's dominant personality within the group, showing why he often emerged as the most visible and vocal member in public settings, even when that tendency created friction with other members who felt overshadowed or annoyed by his constant presence in the spotlight. Fact 7. Tupac's glaring absence. Despite being one of the biggest and most influential stars in hip-hop during 1995, Tupac Shakur does not appear anywhere in the show, creating a noticeable absence that viewers familiar with the era would immediately recognize. Tupac's exclusion from the documentary is particularly strange because the film features numerous other major artists from the same time period, including the notorious B.I.G., Wu-Tang Clan, and various other prominent figures who were shaping hip-hop culture at that moment. The reasons for Tupac's absence from the documentary have never been fully explained, but the timing of the film's production offers some clues about what might have prevented his participation. The documentary was filmed during 1994 and early 1995, a period when Tupac was dealing with serious legal troubles, including a sexual assault conviction that resulted in a prison sentence he began serving in February of 1995. His incarceration and the various legal battles surrounding his case may have made it impossible or impractical for the filmmakers to include him in the documentary, even though his cultural significance at the time was undeniable. Interestingly, while Tupac himself does not appear in the film, his song My Block was included on the show's soundtrack album, creating an odd situation where his music was present but his voice and image were absent from the documentary itself. This exclusion means that the show captured only part of the hip-hop landscape during that crucial moment in the genre's history, missing one of the most important artists who would tragically be murdered just over a year after the film's release. Fact 8. It was filmed during the East-West rivalry. The show was filmed throughout 1994, placing its production directly in the middle of the escalating East Coast versus West Coast hip-hop rivalry that would soon turn deadly and change the genre forever. During the time when cameras were rolling for this documentary, tensions between artists from New York and Los Angeles were increasing rapidly, fueled by personal conflicts, business disputes, and media coverage that amplified every disagreement into a larger cultural battle. The documentary managed to capture artists from both coasts, including East Coast acts like Wu-Tang Clan and the notorious B.I.G., alongside West Coast artists like Warren G. and Thaw Dog Pound, at a moment when collaboration between the two regions was becoming increasingly rare and politically complicated. What makes the film historically significant is that it documented this specific moment before the rivalry escalated into violence, showing these artists in a relatively peaceful context where both coasts could coexist within the same film without obvious hostility. Within 2 years of the show's release, both Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. would be murdered in unsolved shootings that many people attributed to the East Coast-West Coast conflict, transforming the rivalry from a competitive cultural phenomenon into a genuine tragedy that devastated the hip-hop community. Looking back at the show now, viewers can see how the documentary accidentally captured the calm before the storm, preserving footage of artists who were still alive and working together before everything changed. The film serves as a time capsule from a brief window when hip-hop's regional tensions were serious, but had not yet resulted in the loss of life that would soon reshape how artists and fans thought about coastal affiliations and rivalries. Fact 9. The concert footage was black and white. The filmmakers made an unusual and deliberate artistic choice when they shot the concert footage from the Philadelphia Armory performance in grainy black and white, creating a stark visual contrast with the rest of the documentary. while the behind-the-scenes segments, tour footage, and interviews were filmed in vibrant color that captured the energy and atmosphere of hip-hop culture in the mid-90s. The actual concert performance was presented in a completely different visual style. This decision gave the concert footage a raw, documentary feel that resembled classic photographs of historic musical performances, lending the Philadelphia show an almost timeless quality that separated it from the more contemporary-looking color segments. The grainy texture of the black and white footage added an additional layer of grittiness to the concert scenes, emphasizing the authentic, underground nature of hip-hop culture at that moment, before it became fully mainstream and commercially polished. Some viewers found this stylistic choice confusing or disappointing, expecting the concert footage to be the most visually exciting part of the documentary rather than the most stripped-down and minimalist section. However, the black and white cinematography served an important purpose by focusing viewer attention on the performances themselves rather than on elaborate stage productions or visual effects, which would have distracted from the raw talent and energy of the artists on stage. The contrast between the black and white concert and the color tour footage also created a clear visual distinction between public performances and private moments, helping viewers understand when they were watching a formal show versus candid behind-the-scenes interactions. This artistic decision has become one of the documentary's most distinctive features, making the show visually memorable in ways that a more conventional approach to filming concerts would not have achieved. Fact 10. Warren G's Burger King receipt. One of the most unexpectedly memorable and frequently quoted moments from the show features West Coast rapper Warren G casually revealing that he spent $179 at Burger King during a single visit. This seemingly small detail became iconic among fans of the documentary because it perfectly captured the excess and financial freedom that successful hip-hop artists were experiencing during the mid-90s. For most people in 1995, spending nearly $200 at a fast food restaurant would have been completely absurd and practically impossible. But for Warren G, who was riding high on the success of his hit song Regulate and his debut album, this kind of spending represented his new lifestyle and status. The scene works so well because Warren G presents this information without any embarrassment or awareness that it might seem outrageous to viewers, treating a massive Burger King purchase as a completely normal occurrence in his daily life. Fans still reference this moment decades later whenever discussing displays of hip-hop wealth, using Warren G's Burger King receipt as a shorthand example of how artists in the genre demonstrated their success through everyday consumption rather than just through jewelry, cars, or other traditional symbols of wealth. The detail is particularly amusing because Burger King represents such an ordinary, accessible restaurant that most people associate with budget-conscious eating. Yet Warren G managed to turn it into a venue for extravagant spending through sheer volume of food ordered. This moment exemplifies one of the show's greatest strengths, which was its ability to capture small, authentic details that revealed larger truths about hip-hop culture and the lifestyle changes that commercial success brought to artists who had often grown up with very little money. Fact 11. Biggie's rare performance footage. The show contains some of the final concert footage of the notorious B.I.G. performing live before his murder in March of 1997, making the documentary an invaluable historical record of one of hip-hop's greatest artists during his creative peak. This footage was captured in 1994 when Biggie was still relatively early in his career, but already recognized as one of the most talented and important voices in East Coast hip-hop. What makes this performance footage particularly significant is that it was filmed before the widespread availability of the internet and before smartphones made it easy for fans to record and share concert footage, meaning that documentary films like the show were often the only way these performances were preserved for future generations. Biggie's presence in the documentary captures him at a moment when he was confident, successful, and beloved within the hip-hop community. Before the East Coast-West Coast rivalry consumed his life, and before his shocking murder transformed him from a living artist into a legendary martyr. Watching these performances now carries an emotional weight that the original filmmakers could not have anticipated, as viewers know that Biggie's time was tragically limited, and that this footage represents one of the few visual records of his live performances. The documentary preserved his charisma, his stage presence, and his ability to command an audience, qualities that helped explain why his death was felt so deeply throughout the music world. For fans who discovered Biggie's music after his death, the show offers a rare opportunity to see him as a living, breathing performer rather than just as a voice on recordings or a face in photographs. Fact 12. It featured Wu-Tang in Tokyo. The show includes fascinating footage of Wu-Tang Clan performing in Tokyo, Japan, showcasing how hip-hop culture had already achieved significant international reach by the mid-90s, extending far beyond its origins in New York City. The scenes from Japan are remarkable because they feature enthusiastic Japanese fans who clearly knew the lyrics and were deeply engaged with Wu-Tang's music, despite the cultural and linguistic barriers that separated them from the Bronx-born hip-hop group. This international footage was particularly important for demonstrating that hip-hop was not just an American cultural phenomenon, but had become a global movement that resonated with young people around the world who connected with its themes of struggle, authenticity, and resistance to mainstream culture. The Japanese concerts showed Wu-Tang Clan experiencing culture shock as they navigated a country that was completely different from anything they had known in New York, creating moments of both humor and genuine cross-cultural connection as the group interacted with Japanese fans and explored Tokyo. For many American viewers watching the show in 1995, these scenes from Japan might have been their first exposure to the idea that hip-hop had become internationally popular, challenging assumptions that rap music was only relevant within African-American communities or American cities. The footage from Tokyo added scope and ambition to the documentary, preventing it from being just another concert film, and instead positioning hip-hop as a cultural force that was reshaping youth culture on a global scale. Wu-Tang's experience in Japan also highlighted how hip-hop artists were becoming ambassadors for American culture abroad, even as they maintained their authenticity and refused to soften their message for international audiences. Fact 13. The director now runs Paramount. Brian Robbins, the former sitcom actor who made his directorial debut with the show, eventually rose to become the president and CEO of Paramount Pictures and Paramount Global, making his journey from documentary filmmaker to studio executive one of the most unlikely success stories in Hollywood history. After the show, Robbins continued working in entertainment, creating and producing various television shows and films, but few people could have predicted that he would eventually lead one of Hollywood's most historic and powerful studios. His appointment to run Paramount came in September of 2021, when Viacom-CBS, later renamed Paramount Global, promoted him to replace the previous leadership after years of him proving his business acumen and creative instincts. The path from directing a low-budget hip-hop documentary to running a major Hollywood studio is extraordinarily rare, highlighting how far Robbins traveled from his humble beginnings in the entertainment industry. His early work on the show demonstrated his willingness to take creative risks and his ability to connect with audiences who were often ignored or misunderstood by mainstream Hollywood, qualities that likely contributed to his later success as an executive. Robbins also took on leadership of Nickelodeon, the children's television network, where he oversaw programming and development that shaped entertainment for younger generations. Looking back at the show now, viewers can appreciate it not just as a documentary about hip-hop culture in the 90s, but also as the first major project from a filmmaker who would eventually wield enormous influence over American entertainment across multiple platforms and mediums. Fact 14. Method Man vs. U-God on the tour bus. Beyond the famous bullet train argument that many fans remember, the show captured additional confrontations between Method Man and his Wu-Tang Clan groupmates, particularly U-God and Ghostface Killah, revealing ongoing tensions that extended throughout their tour. These heated exchanges showed Method Man getting visibly frustrated with his fellow group members, at one point telling them directly, "Kill that shit, man. Nobody want to hear that shit," in response to their complaints or arguments during their time on the road together. The documentary's willingness to include these uncomfortable moments of conflict gave viewers an honest look at how difficult it could be for multiple strong personalities to work together constantly while dealing with the pressures of touring, media attention, and creative differences. Method Man's dominant personality and his tendency to speak his mind without filtering his thoughts created friction within Wu-Tang Clan that occasionally boiled over into the arguments captured on film. These scenes contradicted the image of unity and brotherhood that Wu-Tang Clan often projected in their music and public appearances, showing instead that the group struggled with the same interpersonal challenges that affect any collection of talented individuals working in close quarters. The confrontations also revealed the stress and exhaustion of touring, particularly international touring, where the group members were dealing with jet lag, cultural differences, and the pressure to perform night after night while maintaining their artistic standards. What makes these moments valuable is their authenticity. The arguments were not manufactured for the cameras or exaggerated for dramatic effect. They were simply what happened when tensions built up during a grueling tour schedule that tested everyone's patience. Fact 15, the $2 million budget seemed impossible. The production team behind the show managed to secure a $2 million budget from Reicher Entertainment and Savoy Pictures, an achievement that seemed nearly impossible given Hollywood's skepticism toward hip-hop-themed projects during the mid-90s. At that time, major studios and production companies viewed hip-hop as a risky and potentially unprofitable subject for films, worried that the genre's association with controversy and its predominantly young African-American audience would limit commercial appeal and make marketing difficult. The conventional wisdom in Hollywood was that films about rap music would only attract a narrow demographic and would struggle to find distribution in suburban multiplexes where the most profitable box office revenue was generated. Despite this institutional resistance, the filmmakers convinced Reicher Entertainment and Savoy Pictures that a documentary capturing hip-hop at this specific cultural moment would have both artistic merit and commercial potential, particularly if they could gain access to the biggest names in the genre. The $2 million budget was substantial enough to allow for professional production quality, international travel to capture tour footage, and the time needed to film multiple concerts and behind-the-scenes moments, but it was still modest by Hollywood standards for documentary filmmaking. Securing this funding represented a breakthrough moment for hip-hop culture's relationship with mainstream entertainment, proving that established production companies were willing to invest real money in projects that took the genre seriously as a subject worthy of cinematic treatment. The fact that the film's soundtrack eventually went platinum and earned back the investment vindicated the decision to fund the documentary, even though the theatrical box office was disappointing, and suggested that the audience for hip-hop content preferred music over documentaries.